Hey, everybody. Welcome to the second hour of the Santita Jackson Show here on AM 950 Radio, the voice of progressive Minnesota. It's a joy to be with you. Had a wonderful conversation as we talked about monopolies, mergers. Kroger's and Albertsons, the two biggest food retailers in the country, are looking at coming together. What is that going to do for price gouging? That is one of the issues that is on the menu for the campaign in 2024. If you want to do something about it, now's the time to vote. Vote, because these corporations, it has been shown that they just raise their prices at will. Has anyone gone to the grocery store lately? Yeah, okay. And guess what? The food is just too high. The cashiers cannot even afford the food. How cruel. Think about that. But another issue that we have got to look at, I mean, just generally speaking, we're looking at down ballot voting. This is so important. Many of us really stay fixed on this jewel at the top, the presidency. But most of us don't realize that the presidency is determined in the states, everybody. You know, there's always been a real attention, if not a balance, between federalism and states' rights. So here we are. And the real culture war, the real power struggle is over education. Think about it. If education were not so important, why would it have been illegal to teach a slave, someone who's enslaved, to read?
Mhm.
Education is so important. What about developing skills? There's an academic track, there's also a vocational track. And we're seeing these vocational schools drained from the community. And so young people who were able to come out of high school and then go into union apprenticeships, they're not able to do that. They don't have the skills now. But the school board, your local elected school board, has the power to deal with that. Have you ever considered running to be on the school board? What are your qualifications? Personally, I think if you just love the children and care about them, you can learn everything else. But you got to get involved. That's the point. This is the Santita Jackson Show on AM 950 Radio, the voice of progressive Minnesota. Please go to the Santita Jackson Show YouTube channel. Like and subscribe. Ashley King down there in Memphis. Please like and subscribe. Robert Williams, shalom, sending you so much love. I know you liked it in the last hour, but I need you to like it in this one too. And we're on X, which is at Santita J, and the Facebook page of mine where I can accept friends as Santita Jackson and Friends. Santita Jackson and Friends. So everybody, please like and share, like and share. Let's talk about the power of these local elected school boards. That is where the power is. And indeed, we're seeing the right wing, Moms for Liberty, and various other groups. They are coming to take over these seats. Why? What is it that they see that we're not seeing? What is it that they understand that we don't understand? Let's talk about that. Indeed, we've got, um, of course, Reverend Dr. Jeanette Wilson, who's been an educator with the Chicago Public School System. And of course, when you start working for Reverend Jessie Jackson, you never stop. She's had the Push for Excellence program. Of course, that is the educational arm of Rainbow Push. So excited to have you, Pastor. I mean, you've got 10 jobs, my sister, and I love it. I love it. I love it. And we've got Brother G2 Brown. We can't say enough about him. He reminds me, Jeanette Wilson, of Danny Davis.
Yes.
Danny Davis, when he got to Congress, just started getting paid for the work that he's been doing for free for everybody down through the years. So I expect G2 Brown to run for Congress at some point. So,
Oh my goodness.
Let's do it.
oh, don't get upset with me. Y'all got my brother over there. And that is not what he was looking to do. But we are so excited about this man from the Journey for Justice Alliance. He has done so much when we need a voice for the voiceless. Uh, he speaks for us. We stand on his shoulders and we thank God for him. And now, guess what he's doing? Beyond having a hunger strike, I hope you're eating. Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you very much. He is running for school board here in Chicago, District 5. And we're going to have shortly one of our nation's leading educators, Dr. Ken Kumashiro, who's going to talk to us about the importance uh, of these local boards of public education. Uh, we're seeing a real fight now. That's really the war zone. Before I speak with you, G2 Brown, Reverend Dr. Jeanette Wilson, the we're seeing on the ground, city after city, hamlet after hamlet, suburb after suburb, township after township, the fight over the school boards, and they are so emotional. But most of us don't realize there's just so much power there. What is it about these? What do these local elected school boards do? What do they have the power to do, Reverend Wilson?
Well, they have an enormous amount of power. They determine budgets for school districts. They approve curriculum for school districts. They vote the superintendents, vote on the salary, and they interview the superintendents for the school system that they are running for. And so when you talk about things like banning books, the school boards have control over those kinds of things. They control how resources are allocated in school systems. And it's a very, very powerful position. And G2 is patently aware of it because the school boards decide whether a school will remain open or will be closed. That school board will determine whether or not you will have metal detectors in the school or not. It will determine security issues for the school. It even determines the kind of technology that school district will have and how they're going to allocate resources. I have visited and worked with a number of school districts, Chicago, as well as in the suburbs. And you will see a school district that is in a poverty stricken area paying a superintendent, G2 knows this, $300,000, and children are not able to read at grade level, don't have the technology in the school. The they don't have school libraries, either online virtual libraries or books in the building. And yet superintendents and uh, their staff make more than the teachers who are assigned to those classrooms to teach children who are poor. School boards will determine meals, how the school will, how and under what circumstances the school will provide breakfast, lunch, and maybe an evening meal. Um, Particularly in schools located in high poverty districts, highly under-resourced districts. So those are some of the things that school districts and school boards have power over. And you have to understand what your power is, how to use it, but also many of these school board members are controlled by the people that help them get elected. And now in Chicago Public Schools, and G2 can talk about this, first time ever, we're going to have an election of school board members. We now have corporate people funding school board candidates like they fund congressional candidates, state representatives, mayors, so forth.
Well, hold on. Stay at that point for a hot second. It seems like they're trying to corporatize our schools. So, what does that? How does that play out? What does that mean? Are they trying to uh, give us more charter schools? Um, are they trying to shift resources away from public schools? I mean, what does that? What do they want when they decide to sponsor a candidate and to really overtake these school boards? Because that's what they're doing, right? That's
Right.
what they're seeking to do.
Well,
What is the outcome that they're looking for?
well, the thing that they're looking for, schools are businesses, and we don't think about them as a business. Schools spend a lot of money. They buy books, they buy materials, they buy food, they buy technology. So people who engage in that industry want to make sure that they continue to get the contracts. Schools buy security services. Schools buy facility renovation. They buy people to clean the buildings. There's a lot of money in this business called school and education. And the majority of it is I'm trying to figure out if I'm a business person. I support G2. What's in it for me? What kind of contracts will I be able to get shifted in my direction? A big issue in schools would be the food budget. It's a major budget. The construction budget in schools and the cleaning budgets. We have now in Chicago where we had, for the first time, a Black contractor having the cleaning services of a majority of the schools located in our community. That has shifted. But somebody decided, well, we're going to change who gets that contract. And you now have a majority contractor taking the majority of the schools, and the Black and Hispanic have to share smaller areas. It's all about the money. And that's why if I am a corporate person, I supply food to schools, and you think about who feeds our children. When you and I went to school, or at least when I went, we had somebody that was paid to cook in the building.
Mhm.
Now you have these companies, food service companies, and it's only about 4 of them in the country that provide food service to our children. And they eat pizza and cheese every day. We had Aunt Jane, she was cooking healthy food every day, breakfast and lunch for us. The school's a major business, and I don't think we understand that. The snow removal contracts, I remember when Vallis became CEO of Chicago Public Schools, the first time we were able to open up contracts for Black contractors to remove the snow from the school ground. Cut the grass, that's a contract. The shades in our school buildings, all that's business.
But look, but wait a minute. What about the teachers? Is that part of the program?
Teachers make less than a school engineer. The engineer opens and closes the building. If the engineer goes on strike, teachers can't even go in the building. Teachers make less than the janitors in many cases.
Well, I'm all about paying the janitors top dollar because we need.
I'm all about paying them too,
but I mean, do they have any? Do the school boards? I mean, what do they do about? Do they have any say over curriculum?
Yeah, they vote on the curriculum. The superintendent will recommend a curriculum to the school board. And 9 times out of 10, they will agree with the superintendent unless they want to get rid of the superintendent, and they vote against whatever he or she brings. They have absolute budgetary authority. They hire the lawyers for the school system. And I have watched as a Black lawyer to see in Black-led school districts, white lawyers, the same white lawyer controls. And they then make sure that you follow the rules of the people that put that lawyer in place, the accounting system, accountants, all of that's approved by school board.
Well, you know,
budget.
Well, we don't look at schools as a business.
It's a major business.
But we also, I don't think we really understand just what goes into a school board. Why are you running now, G2 Brown?
Yes, ma'am. I mean, we've been fighting for this right. I know myself since at least 2006, because we realized as schools were being closed, a lot of people talk about in Chicago, they talk about the 50 school closings, but it's been over 160 school closings in Chicago. And school closings and the loss of affordable housing have been the 2 main drivers that have pushed Black people out of the city of Chicago. So I'm running because we were able to elect a former organizer into the office of the mayor. And he made a commitment to expand community schools, to expand what we call sustainable community schools. And we know through all the data that we have and what we've observed is that this is one model of education that works in urban communities. And so I knew that in order to protect that model and to stop the privatization of education in Chicago, in other words, school closings and charter school expansion, that I needed to be on that school board to defend what we fought so hard to get. You mentioned Diet. Diet was the first sustainable community school. And that basically means it's a full service community school with even more with community input on more than just after school programs, community input on more than just what kind of evening programs you want for parents, but you have input on the curriculum, you have input on teacher supports, wraparound supports for students, what the school climate should be for young people, what parent and community engagement should look like, and ultimately what we call an inclusive school leader looks like. Because schools are community institutions, right? They are a business, but they are community institutions. They, you know, I went to Wendell Smith Elementary on the south side of Chicago, and so did, I'm the oldest of four, and so did all my siblings. All my siblings went to that school, right? And so when I was long done with elementary school and in high school, my little sister still went to Wendell Smith Elementary School. So we have to understand that one of the ways that you destroy a community is you destroy its basic quality of life institutions. And one reality in Black communities, which is different than when all of us grew up, today we own very little of it. We control very little of it. So I'm running for school board, one, because, and this is really interesting that Chicago's never had an elected school board. I mean, since 1833, Chicago's never had an elected school board. And this body can raise your taxes. So if that's not taxation without representation, I don't know what is. And so this is why we fought so hard and organized so hard to finally win this right. And those people that Reverend Wilson was just speaking about, those people that have been making boatloads of money off curriculum contracts, testing contracts, privatizing janitorial services, running charter schools, running contract schools. They've been using the $9.9 billion budget at CPS like a pig's trough. They've been gorging themselves while our young people have been underserved. So we know that they're not happy. We know that they're going to try to buy these elections. And we maintain that it's no longer David versus Goliath in Chicago. It's a fight. It's a fight. And so we're going to out-organize them to make sure that we have the right people on these school boards.
Well, you know, G2 Brown, it seems that we're seeing this fight all over the country. It's everywhere. It seems as if Americans' minds have opened up, and now you have people who are not well known, because quite frankly, you're not, for people who are not from Chicago who are this show, this is someone who's extremely well known in the community, extremely well known. And even he will have huge forces that are arrayed against him because people want these seats. Explain to me why it is that these seats on these school boards are fought over tooth and nail, G2 Brown. I mean, because you've got the Moms for Liberty, people marching on Washington, and you've got all of these different education groups, Reverend Dr. Wilson, and they are organizing, and they're telling you what books you can and cannot read. We haven't even gotten into the business part of it yet. I mean, they are controlling what our children will learn, and I guess whether these teachers stay or not. I mean, it's just, there's a lot to it. Oh wow, you know what, he just fell off, but we're going to get G2 Brown back on. But Reverend Wilson, why is it that that these seats are so hotly contested? What is it about the school board? Well, we've got G2 Brown back. What is it about the school board that, I mean, everybody wants these seats?
Well, there's an old saying that all power is local. And I think you know, as Reverend Wilson said, these are very powerful positions. But then also the demographics in America are changing rapidly, right? And according to census tracts, uh, between somewhere in 2030 and 2040, white Americans will be a minority in the United States. And so as you see the demographics change, you also see, I want us to remember South Carolina when they were saying, you know, Jews will not replace us, right? There's an effort to control what education looks like. There's also, and just getting down to it, there is billionaires who don't want a conscious constituency, who are funding Moms for Liberty, who are funding groups like Kids First here in Chicago. They're funding all of these pro-private. These are not naturally. When Reverend Jesse Jackson helped start the Kenwood Oakland Community Organization, that was a true grassroots community organization made up by people in the neighborhood, generated or created because Black people had restrictive covenants stopping us from being able to shop and going up and go to school or buy housing where we wanted. These are what we call astroturf groups. These are groups that get a check and then they're propped up by these billionaires in order to advance a particular agenda. And that is the agenda called school choice. And what I like to share is that, you know, and because we haven't had equity in public education in the United States, some of us have drank that Kool-Aid, right? But the fight has never been, I've never been in a room with a bunch of parents and they're like, it's not enough schools. I've been in rooms with parents and they've said, my child doesn't have this, my child doesn't have that. We don't have technology. We don't have a science lab. We don't, you know, et cetera, et cetera.
We don't have a pool.
Yes.
Classrooms are overcrowded.
So the fighters.
But I'd like for G2 Brown to really, I want you to drill down on this point, because we keep hearing 50 schools have been closed. He said, no. It's more than 3 times that amount, that number.
Yes, ma'am. Because because the goal has been to get us. I mean, and the proof is in the pudding. And as you said, it's not just a Chicago issue. Go to Washington, D.C., the second most chartered school district in the United States. We used to call it Chocolate City. Used to be able to go to U Street and go to the go-go clubs. And now U Street is a memory. And Black people are less than 50% of Washington, D.C. When we were closer to like in Marion Barry's time, we were close to like 77, 78%.
And guess what? We couldn't get statehood. Now they're going to get it.
Yeah. Yes, ma'am. Okay. But
I'm not paranoid, everybody. Someone is chasing me.
and so the reason that they have been pushing this school choice narrative, remember, school choice was born out of white people pulling their children out of public schools as a response to Brown versus Board. So when white people evacuated Prince George's County and they evacuated Davis County, and Senator Harry Byrd called for massive resistance to Brown versus Board, that was called school choice. And so when you go to any charter school, no matter what they say, you go to any charter school, on their governing board are 15 people. And the overwhelming majority of those people are business people with 2 parent slots. In other words, 2 token parent slots. So you can't have equity if you don't have governance. If you don't have the ability to decide how institutions impact your life, then you can't have equity. You might have benevolence. You might have somebody, you might have a nice slave master, but you still got a master. And so for the.
You can pick it up. Okay,
well,
he's
just to what he was saying, you don't have benevolence. You may have benevolence, but you don't have power, because they pick people that they control to be in these schools, so that you're going to vote the way I tell you. And that's the issue that we're talking about, because they don't know the power that they have. So they just, they got a position. It was like the way the LSC started. It was independent, and then people started controlling who sat on those boards.
Go get some water.
I am. Thank you.
Okay. Well, you know, before I bring on, excuse me, Dr. Kumashiro, because in fact, he has linked education to justice.
It is
UT Brown, which is, I mean, he's organized
right
this
on point.
international conference on education and justice. And he's a best-selling author, former dean of Hofstra University School of Education, University of San Francisco School of Education, and someone for whom Reverend Jackson and I have tremendous admiration and respect. Award-winning author of 10 books, and his latest book, everybody, is this, Surrendered: Why Progressives Are Losing the Biggest Battles in Education. Why progressives are losing the biggest battles in education. And I want to bring this gentleman. I can't believe I'm actually seeing you face to face, Doc. What? And you are with the head of Push for Excellence. She's an educator and a lawyer, Reverend Dr. Jeanette Wilson. And this is one of Chicago's leading activists. Indeed, he's been so big in the space for so many years, and we can never, ever thank G2 Brown enough for all that he does, the Journey for Justice Alliance, but he is running for school board here in Chicago. I knew you would be excited. See how excited he is that you run. Now, why are you excited about him running for school board?
Well, first of all, what a treat to join all of you, and I think it's so beautiful to see you, your smiling face. And well, part of the reason I'm excited that G2 Brown is running for school board is because I'm a big fan of G2 from my time living in Chicago and knowing the incredible community organizing that you do. But for me, the larger picture is that, you know, schools are so often sites of very profound ideological and political struggle in society, right? It's where we as a society where many groups in society are battling to define what the future of society is to look like. And school boards have an enormous role to play in shaping what is that vision that we're working towards in schools. And hence the school board elections, and anyone who kind of is involved in decision making regarding what schools can look like, play such a vital role in that struggle. And so best wishes to G2. I can't wait to see how the campaign leads, but also the changes that you make possible in schools.
But you know, he made the point, and you know, you have noted this. Everyone talks about the 50 schools that were closed in Chicago. Of course, the schools, you know, big Black iconic names. We've lost 300,000, at least 300,000 Black people in terms of population in Chicago. It's like a hole has been blown in the Black community here politically, right? And socially and culturally. But it's actually G2. I don't want to step on your line. We keep hearing 50 schools. How many schools has it been?
It's been over 160. You know, during the DNC, I had a group of people here from around the country, and we did some events here, and I was taking them up and down State Street, and I was explaining to them that there were 100,000 people that lived on State Street. It was a small city. If you talk about Robert Taylor Homes, you talk about Stateway Gardens. If you talk about the Ickeys, you talk about the Dearborn Homes. The only thing left now are the Dearborn Homes. And then they saw all these schools because these schools closed in 2004, right? So this didn't start with Rahm Emanuel. This started with a plan called the Mid-South Plan, which was a plan to close 20 out of the 22 schools in the Bronzeville community and turn them into either charter or contract schools. Now, why was Bronzeville so important for your listeners? Because Bronzeville is a historic Black community that is 10 minutes from downtown Chicago and right off the lakefront, prime real estate. And what they wanted to do to Bronzeville, what they did to Cabrini Green. And so if you go where Cabrini Green used to be, right off the lakefront, probably about 5 minutes from downtown Chicago, it's as if Black people never lived there. We have been purged, not gentrified. We have been purged out of Chicago.
We named it from Cabrini to New City.
That's right. Now it's called New City.
Yeah.
And We remember our ancestor Marion and Zinga Stamps. They didn't get Cabrini Green until after Marion Stamps transition, because she was an organizer. She even had the street organizations politicized over there to fight for Cabrini Green. And her daughter now, Tyra Stamps, is moving in that same spirit as Cook County Commissioner. But no, it's been way more than 50 schools. They've been working on this since I said it started with the Mid-South Plan. The second phase was called Renaissance 2010, and that was a citywide effort. It was a citywide effort to create 60 new schools by closing 100 schools.
And then, of course, the CEO of the schools at that time went on to become the Secretary of Education.
No, you got to go back.
I'm trying to, because when he was named as the secretary, designate, Chicagoans went, no, don't do this.
Don't do it. But I know that Reverend Wilson is going where I'm going, so I want to go there. If I understand anything correctly, and I'm saying this for your listeners so people understand how the setup happened in Chicago. When so first, local school councils were created in 1989. Chicago had 6 straight years of improvement on the Iowa test of basic skills. Mayor Daley invented an education crisis in 1995. The state legislature passed what was called the Amendatory Act, which gave him complete control over the board, and it no longer had to be a superintendent, it could be a CEO. So in other words, somebody who was unqualified to teach their way out of a paper bag can now run an entire school district. Paul Vallis was the first. What did he do? And please, sisters and brothers, hear this. The first thing he did is he started creating all of these magnet schools, these selective enrollment schools all over the city of Chicago. What did that do to Black schools? It segregated the talent. So as they pulled the highest academic performing children out of neighborhood schools, then they could say you have failing schools, and they put over 160 schools on academic probation. Y'all hear the setup? And they put all these people on all these schools on academic probation. Most schools that went on probation, Ms. Jackson, never came off. It was a graveyard. And so Paul Vallis was like the person who tilled the soil, and then the person who planted the seeds, and the person who watered those poison seeds was Arnie Duncan.
Now hold that thought.
Yes, ma'am.
No, because I want Dr. Kumashiro to come in, because this is, all of you are connecting these dots, and I want everyone to hear that, because as the good doctor did, he recognized, acknowledged your brilliance as a community organizer. Because if we don't have people like you,
I appreciate that.
Oh no! If we don't have you, we're lost.
Well, Kevin's my brother from way back, so we good.
I see.
Indeed,
because you know what? Because as he was painting the picture of Chicago, this is happening all over the country. It's everywhere. And it was codified. And the only reason I brought up Arnie Duncan is because it was codified on a national level. You know, when he became Secretary of Education, I said, whoa. And I'm a product of the Chicago Public Schools.
As am I.
I went to a neighborhood school. Then I went to a magnet school. I was a merit scholar, all of that. And I'm like, it is possible when they have the intention. But you know what they did with my magnet school? Because we were the first full class to come out of Whitney Young, right?
Oh, wow.
When I got there, what was interesting was the superintendent of schools, Dr. Kumashiro, had, and Mr. Brown, Brother Brown, and Reverend Wilson, the superintendent of schools had pulled his daughter out of her high school and put her there. The president of the CTU, her son was there. Now, mind you, Reverend was so controversial, I had to have top scores because it would have been a news story, right? And you know that because you were here while all of us were growing up. Chicago was so controversial. My parents had to send the rest of my siblings away. I'm the eldest. Oh, yeah. No, Jesse never would have survived Chicago. Are you kidding? So I'm simply saying, I saw all of these. I never realized that this was a school for privilege, Dr. Kumashiro. I heard that this was the best high school in the city at the time. And if I was going to go to a public school, that's where I wanted to go. But you know what they had done? They pulled all the top teachers.
And
But the
so
most
often I feel like
And the top
these
students.
these so-called reforms, sometimes we connect them to maybe the individual who was in the role at the time, like say Arnie Duncan. But what I appreciate about G2 Brown's history is the reminder that these reforms are often come from blueprints that have been very thoroughly with much funding designed with very clear intentions, right? So even when we think about what Arnie Duncan did, that he took to the nation writ large, right? Renaissance 2010 becomes like in some ways the roadmap for what would become Race to the Top. But Renaissance 2010, the Arnie Duncan plan, was actually, where did that come from? Well, that actually came from a plan called Left Behind that came from the Commercial Club of
The
Chicago.
commercial club, that's right.
One thing that I really appreciate about your focus, Ms. Jackson, on school boards is that, when we look over the past 50 years in public education across the country, school boards are often a site of battles, but where we see kind of the strategic takeover of school boards come from national movements, right? I think about, like, for me, a blueprint for what's happening right now with lots of organizing from the political right to take over school boards. We saw kind of the roadmap for how to do that really well in the 1980s, right? This 1970s and 1980s was when the conservative movement was really bubbling up, and so much of that was in response to civil rights organizing. But it was in the 1980s that the political right really turned their attention to education, and one of those battlegrounds was school boards. If you think about the changes in the 60s and 70s through civil rights organizing, through the so-called federal era in education, when the federal government was turning more of its attention to education through the Supreme Court and through Congress, what you saw was a lot of gains that reflected civil rights goals, such as desegregating schools, expanding the curriculum to be more multicultural, advancing affirmative action in higher education, making funding far more equitable. I mean, there's all these gains that were happening. And in the 60s and 70s, you actually did see the so-called achievement gap closing across the country. So it's not surprising then that one of the policy levers for the conservatives to push back on gains from the civil rights movement is going to come in education. And one of the players, I think many of your listeners know that, conservative kind of movements from the 1970s and 80s actually was this really it was a combination of many different sectors in society that many, just a few years ago weren't necessarily in agreement with each other, right? You have the kind of corporate neoliberal wing, you have the mainstream conservative wing, you also have the religious right. These groups weren't necessarily all on the same page, but they were able to work in coalition and in concert with one another, and many of them turned their attention to education. It was a lot of religious right organizers that in the 1980s realized that federal government makes some decisions, state makes some decisions, but who makes some of the key and most significant and profound decisions around what happens day to day in schools? It's the school boards. And so a lot of attention got turned to school board elections, because I think many of us know not many people vote in school board elections. In large cities, you can have you can be elected into school board elections in large cities with very, very small numbers of votes compared to, say, the city council, just because in many cities, school board elections don't even coincide with the general elections in November. All of which is to say that by the 1990s, over 50% of seats on elected school boards were occupied by people who identified with the religious right. They were very successful at taking over school boards. And so I think you have this roadmap, right, from decades ago of how a national movement can actually shape local politics around. And it's not surprising that that's bubbling up right now as we emerge into a new kind of manufactured crisis in education.
Well, and the progressive church has not done anything. You just see all of this organizing in the churches on the right, and they secularize Moms for Liberty, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But they have very definite agendas. And part of the agenda is, and it's political. And it's like we're missing that. Even the way they stagger the school board elections, as you just pointed out, because nobody pays attention to that. The reason I'm paying attention to this election, quite frankly, is because of you, G2 Brown.
Well, Ms. Jackson, I want to say this. I appreciate the history that Dr. Kumashiro just laid down for us. But here's what we have to acknowledge. This hasn't just been a right-wing effort.
Mm-hmm. We
have what you call corporate Democrats.
Yes.
And as the privatization, as hedge funders were passing out checks, there were a lot of Democrats who were taking those checks.
Stop.
And so
this is what they call a bipartisan betrayal, right?
A bipartisan betrayal.
Okay.
At the presidential forum that we did in Pittsburgh in 2019, we called it a bipartisan failure of the mandate of Brown versus Board, right? And so, I think what's really important is, because there are a lot of different triggers that they pull. Now they're focusing on these local school board elections. But one of the things that happened, I think in particular because the response to school closings was so explosive in Houston, in Oakland, all over the country, that they took away our right to vote through schemes like mayoral control and state takeovers, right? And this didn't happen in just Republican spaces. And so I think that what we have to recognize is, for Black and Brown communities, the power of community organizing. We cannot relax. We have to organize in order to control the institutions that impact our lives, because that's like a sheepdog looking at a wolf and pretending that it's not a wolf. The wolf is outside our fence, and the wolf is hunting it, and the wolf has not stopped hunting since we were brought here. And so we have to start organizing in our communities, building organizations, developing a conscious constituency, dreaming how our institutions should look. And then when people are activated because they've actually been involved, then we won't have such low turnout. And the microcosm of that fight, the microcosm that proves that that's true, was the fight for diet. Mm-hmm. The fight for diet, the reason why we were able to pack town hall meetings, the reason why we brought 500 people when Mayor Rahm Emanuel did the budget hearing and they chased him off the stage, is because I went to all of those parents in those feeder schools and done sessions with them and asked them, what if you could dream, what would you want for your baby? And then, Ms. Jackson, I brought that back to them and they saw that they were actually listened to. Mm-hmm. Our superpower and our secret weapon is that nobody goes to Ms. Jones and asks her, what's your vision of a better world, and mean it. Mm-hmm. It is fertile ground. It is fertile ground. And I think that's what's got to happen. If not, they're going to, it'll be called charter schools once, it'll be vouchers next, it'll be virtual schools next, it'll be something, right? Because they are always hunting. And we have to stop acting like prey. And we have to start defending our communities by organizing our communities. There ain't no way around it. There is no way around it.
G2 Brown, everybody.
Yeah.
Because that's why I'm so appreciative of the fact that you are running for school board, because it's shining a light. And I appreciate this education conference, this international conference that you're putting on, Dr. Kumashiro, because you're one of the few people, Mr. Brown, that you link education and justice.
Absolutely.
Why? Why the linkage? Because this is the 14th annual international, because you see this not just you don't just see it in Chicago and California and New York and Washington. You said, wait. This is an international issue. It's an international movement. And please explain that, because if I look at Project 2025, these people are trying to wipe out the Department of Education.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think, one time I was at a conference where someone was asking, if we were in uh, a fascist or an authoritarian country, what would you think schools would look like? What would you imagine schools would look like if it's trying to support an authoritarian regime? And so we were brainstorming that in a fascist state, we might have some schools that were really awesome for, the most elite. So the few most elite, powerful people would be getting the most well-resourced schools out there with rich curriculum and well-compensated teachers and lots of arts and lots of play and lots of care. And what would the masses get? Well, they would probably get a watered-down curriculum that is preparing you to follow. And your schools are impoverished and your teachers are under-resourced and your curriculum is outdated and the buildings are falling apart. And as we were looking around the room and we're brainstorming this, we're like, well, that kind of sounds like this kind of two-tiered system of schools that we have in this country, which kind of raises the question, well, if schools were designed to advance democracy, if they're in a democratic country and they're actually supposed to be strengthening democratic institutions rather than weakening them, what would you imagine schools to look like? And I would argue that that's really the central question that education, students, teachers, leaders, community members needs to be grappling with, is not just how do we teach the disciplines or how do we prepare you for your next job or something like that. It's not just instrumentalist. Education really plays this central role in helping us to imagine what could be. And in fact, when we step back and we see that education has a central role or could play a central role in advancing democracy and justice, it really gets us to see that we have to even more broadly or differently define what we think the purposes of schools are and what we think success in schools means. Like, success shouldn't just be about performing the way that those in power think I'm supposed to perform. Success doesn't simply mean that I'm better prepared to fit into the society as it is. To me, success in schools, or the purpose of schools, is to prepare us to imagine the world as it is not yet, and then to build towards that world if we so choose. And so when I think then about, connections, or even what you and G2 were just talking about, which is the role of organizing, those who are trying to dismantle education have been incredibly successful at mobilizing communities around the wrong vision, right? School board elections often verge around things like charter schools or vouchers or bringing down CRT, even though most people don't even know what that means, and DEI, and you put out there something that's inflammatory, something that's like this, this scary thing that is often a misrepresentation, and that mobilized people. That's an organizing tool, right? So part of what we need to do is make certain that we are too engaging in organizing, but organizing for a much more just vision of the kind of society that we want to be building towards. I think that's why so many folks do kind of see that education plays this very fundamental role in strengthening democracy. It can be instrumental to advancing justice, and we have to double down on those goals and not sort of tiptoe away from them. As both of you have been talking about, like, I think one of the major concerns we have in this moment is that groups that have typically been the champions of moving us towards democracy and justice too often are tiptoeing around these issues because they see that it's being inflamed in the wrong way. Rather than letting someone else frame the debate, we need to come in and frame the debate for ourselves and insist that these are the goals we move towards, and this is the role that education can and should play in that direction.
Well, because education, it really does, it frees the mind. But maybe, we need to look at what's happening on a societal level much more deeply, because, when you have an educated populace, they're tough to manage.
Exactly. I think that's why so many people are afraid of educational institutions, right? When education does its job, it's not simply getting you to think the way that those in power want you to think. I mean, the whole point of education is to see that we don't have all the answers yet, that maybe we need to be questioning the status quo. I mean, I think that's why in, moments when regimes are like struggling to hold on to power, they go after those groups in society who often play the role of questioning dominant narratives. And those could be
Mm.
the judges, those could be the reporters, those could be the artists, the scientists, and the educators, right? These are the groups that are often targeted by these regimes. So when we do our job right, yes, it can be scary, but that's why education, it's scary precisely because education has this kind of liberatory potential.
That's why they're taking the creative arts out of the schools. I mean, they're everything that makes you think, sewing, I mean, vocation, because you really have to apply what you've learned when you are a plumber, when you're a carpenter. It's one thing to read it, it's another thing to apply it. And oh, I cut this incorrectly. I've got a G2 Brown. You know what? I've got about 4 minutes left for both of you in total. And I'm getting out the way because I want, number one, when is the election? I want you to come back so you can talk about this.
Yes, ma'am.
Dr. Kumashiro, you've got to talk about this because I need to know when the conference is, because we've got some things that we've got to vote about, everybody, on November 5th, but not just on November 5th. You need to be vigilant. You need to be running for your school boards. You need to get involved because we don't want robots. We want human beings, right?
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
G. Brown, 2 minutes for you.
Yes, ma'am. So Dr.
The
Jackson,
election date is when?
the election date is November 5th with the presidential election. So it's down ballot when we're voting for president. So I would just say thank you for providing this space. Dr. Kumashiro, it's good to see you, brother. It's been too long. And if people want to, just to find out more about the campaign, you want to donate, you can find me on Facebook, Aaron G2 Brown. That's AARONJITU Brown. You can find me on X or Twitter, and that same thing, Instagram. You can find me there. My website should be up tonight. But if I understand anything correctly, that's where you can find me on social media. Again, the election is on November 5th.
Okay, no, because we want you and know that you have a home here, because you
Yes,
can have,
ma'am.
well, no, because you know that, and you can have other
Yeah.
people. You can show other people how to run, because you're going to
Mm.
inspire someone else. That's the great thing. But and it plugs into you and Dr. Kumashiro are really feeding off of each other into one, because have this international conference on education and justice. It's one of the things that I appreciate about you, because we have surrendered. We have surrendered. I mean, I want everyone to get the book, Surrendered: Why Progressives Are Losing the Biggest Battles in Education. We don't have to, but it's like we're seeding the ground. Doctor?
Yeah, well, first of all, I hope all your listeners will absolutely be supporting G2 Brown in his run. I met him like 20 years ago and was already a legend. Everyone's talking about G2 Brown in Chicago as just this visionary on organizing and justice.
I appreciate that.
And Ms. Jackson, what a treat to be able to be with you. And yes, I mean, I hope your listeners will get involved in education organizing. And one of those spaces a month after G2 is elected is my International Conference on Education and Justice in early December in Honolulu. So yeah, you keep organizing, keep learning, and let's build towards a better school and society.
Well,
Send me an invite, brother. I may need a couple of days after this election.
You both are invited for sure.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Kick him out of Hawaii because he is going to start organizing there. Now you know.
Hey.
He's going to go and try and organize the indigenous. Go to Maui. That's what we need to do, because we
Yes,
want.
ma'am.
Yeah, I said it. Stop kicking them out. Let them go home. These people did not want to be colonized, and that is what Hawaii is. And let us deal with that.
Yes, thank you, Ms. Jackson, for that.
And Santita, no. My mother went to Hawaii years ago, and I'll say this as we go, and she came back furious. It was just after my sister was born in 1975. And she said, I did not know. No, it was 1976. She had gone with my father to a conference. She said, I did not know that they kept the indigenous people on an island, and if they leave the island, they cannot go back. We have treated the Hawaiian people horrifically.
Yes.
Horrifically. That's why what happened in Maui is a crime.
Yes.
So I'm glad that you are going to Hawaii to have this education and justice conference, because our brothers and sisters, the indigenous people of Hawaii, they need justice.
Yes.
They need
Absolutely.
justice today. They need it like we all need it. And
Yes,
I'm in
ma'am.
solidarity with them. I'm in solidarity with them. My heart beyond breaking for them, I'm in solidarity with them. And if you know of anyone in that space as they're fighting to get their land back, bring them to me, because I want to bring them on the show.
Awesome. I will. I will.
No, because you know what, America, you've got to be right. In order for right to happen to you, you've got to get right. You've got to do right by the indigenous people. You've got to do right by the indigenous people of Hawaii and of Alaska.
Yes.
And the people who are coming back home, El Norte, the Spanish speaking indigenous people. They're the conquered people, because the Mexicans are really very dark skinned people. There's a lot going on here, everybody, and you need to open your eyes and pay attention. But we've got to have justice for everybody, and we all have skin in the game.
Miss Jackson, you should do a show on colonization.
Yes.
Well, you know what?
You should do a show on colonization.
Will the two of you come on and be on?
Yes.
Absolutely.
And I will tell you a story about the time I went to Thailand and I found out who the Aboriginal people were in Thailand.
Well, let me tell you something. I'm gonna have to get off here now, but I'm gonna tell you, when you go to these places and find out who the Aboriginal people are and how they're treated, you'll have a different view of.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so everybody, we are all in this together, whether you like it or not. We are the 99%. If you're not royalty, you own nothing. Come on, y'all. And it is now time to tie education to justice. That's what Brown v. Board of Education was about. That is what denying enslaved people the right to read. The right to read. That's the Detroit Public Schools. These students are suing because they have said, wait a minute, I have a right to learn. You have not taught me. Congressman Jesse Jackson Jr., hey, an amendment to the Constitution. You have no protected constitutional right to learn.
Nope.
Come on, y'all. Come on, think about that and spread the word. G2 Brown, Jitu Brown. Look him up. That's
yes,
right.
Ma'am.
And you're going to come back on here and tell people how to run. How about that?
Yes.
And
yes,
you're going to
ma'am.
come back on here and talk about this international conference for education and justice before you go to Hawaii. Hello. Sending you so much love, and much love to my morning stars. I love you all. God bless you. The Santita.